Okay, Boker Tov. Today's Daf Omi is Bava Kamma Daf Tzadi, and we're going to start on 90 Aleph, around 7 lines from the top. We're discussing the whole concept of Kinyan Aperos, Kinyan Aguftami. Whether or not we say that if a person owns or has the rights to use the fruits of a property, that's equivalent to owning the whole property, Kinyan Aguftami. And the Gemara just said that this is a dispute. And Gemara is now going to say how this is a Tanaitic dispute. Bepukta dahani tanai. This is a Tanaitic dispute. Tanya. We're going to see it's actually a four-way dispute. We learned in the Brisa, Mochar Avdo Acher. Somebody who sells a slave to another person, Pasakimo, but he decided or he determined when he sold the slave, Amanas Sheyisham Shenu Shloshim Yom. He says, I'm selling you my slave on the condition and my slave will continue to work for me for the next 30 days. In other words, I'm selling you the guf, but I have the peros. You have the body, but I have the fruit for the next 30 days. So Rabbi Meir says, Rabbi Meir Omer Rishon Yeshno B'din Yom Yomayim Neshu Tachtav. Rabbi Meir says that the first person, the first owner, the law of Yomer Yomayim applies to him because the slave is under his authority. What's the law of Yom Yomayim? The law of Yom Yomayim is a leniency for the owner of a slave, that anybody else who kills a slave is going to be treated as though they killed another human being, liable to the death penalty. But the owner of the slave will be found liable if the slave dies within 24 hours. But if the slave dies after 24 hours, and the owner of the slave is going to be exempt. So Rabbi Meir says the first one who still has the rights to the fruits, he is the one who has the leniency. So we see from here, Kasavar, his other position, Kinyan Peros, Kinyan Aguftami. Because he owns the access to the fruits, it's as though he owns the whole entity. That's Rabbi Meir's position. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, Sheni Yeshna B'din Yom Yomayim. The second owner is the one who has this leniency that's granted to the owner of Yom Yomayim, Neshu Kaspo, because the slave is considered to be his money because he has the guf. So he's of the position, Kisavar, Kinyan Peros, Lavka, Kinyan Aguftami. So Yehuda's of the position that just because you own the Peros doesn't mean you own the guf, and the Kinyan Peros is not like Kinyan Aguf. The third opinion is Rabbi Yossi Omer, Shneim Yeshnam B'din Yom Yomayim. Both the master who has him for the next 30 days and the one who acquired the slave, both of them have this leniency of Yom O Yomayim, Zevim Neisheh Hu Tachtav, Zevim Neishu Kaspo. One, because he is still under his domain for the next 30 days, and one, because he is his money. And Misafko Kinyan Peres Ika Kinyan Aguftamim, because Rabbi Yossi says we're not sure whether or not Kinyan Peres is going to be considered to be the ownership here, or the Kinyan Guf is the ownership. Ilav Kinyan Aguftamim. So we're not sure of the status of Kinyan Peres, and so therefore, for suffering the Fashal Sakil. We're not going to execute either master on this basis because it's a doubt about a matter of capital punishment. So therefore we go leniency. Now we go to the fourth approach. Rabbi Eliezer says, is a different girsa. Rabbi Eliezer says, Shneim Eina B'din Yom Yomayim. Neither master has the leniency of Yom Yomayim. The second master doesn't have it because he doesn't have the rights to the fruits right now. And the first one doesn't have it because he's not entitled to the kasef at this point. Because he doesn't have kinyan aguf. So therefore, neither one could do it. So explains Rava, what's the svar of Rabbi Elazar? Rava, my time at Rabbi Elazar. Amakra ki kaspohu. Pasuk says that you have this law of Yom Yomayim because he is your money, which means kaspoh miyuchad law. He means he needs to have the whole thing. It has to be specifically designated for him. So therefore, in this case, since there's a shared partnership, he doesn't he doesn't have the leniency of Yom Yamayim for the owner. So then the Gemara says, Kaman Ozla Hada Amar Amemer. Like whom does this go? That which Amemer taught. Ish Isha Shemachru that a husband and wife, even together, they're not able to sell their nichsei muluk property. The property that the woman brought into the marriage and said to the husband, you have the fruits and I'll have the goof. They can't sell it. The reason is, according as the way Rashi explains, because neither one owns it enough. It's not that they each own a 50% share. Neither one owns it. And if one of them would die, the one that remains will be able to take it back from the person who purchased it. Because it's not, Rashi says, it's not similar to general partnership. Because there, one person owns a portion to take his half, etc. But here, in this case, with the part that they own, they completely own. And so therefore, it's unable to be sold in that way. Because the parts that they own are completely owned by one person. So that's what. So this statement of Maimar, that follows the position of Rabbi Elazar, because he's in the position in order to free a Canaanite slave, you need to have the Eved specifically owned by a specific owner, and so too also by selling assets, he requires that they need to be all completely owned by a specific owner and not partially owned. So. Similar, we say, Man Tana Tana Rabbana Misha Chatzi Evel Chatzi Ben Chorin Chen Evet Shal Shnei Shutvin Ein Yotzim Beroshi Evarim Shein Chozrin. Also, a slave, Canaanite slave, goes free if you knock out one of the 24 limbs of the slave. So too we learned, like whom does it is this price that says if you have a slave that's half free and half slave, or a slave of two partners, they don't go out if you knock out the limbs that don't regenerate. And where Mordechai Ravashi, Achayam Shmei the Rabbi Elazar, Mishmei the Rabbi Elazar, he Milo Rabbi Elazar Kasva Miuchad Lo Achanami Abda Miuchad Lo. This is also the position of Rabbi Elazar, because Rabbi Elazar says it has to be the slave specifically designated to him. Slave owned by partners, you wouldn't be able to release in that manner. Okay, so now we're up to the bottom Mishnah, which now we talk about matters of humiliation. So somebody who blasts. So Rashi offers two perushim. One is you smack the friend on the ear, or you blast, make a sound in his ear, make him embarrassed. No single sela. You give him a sela, which for humiliation. Rabbi Yehuda says, Mishum Rabbi Yossi Agluin Mana. You give him a mana. Sitra, let's say you slapped him. No single masayim zuz. You give him 200 zuz. You slap him with the back of his hand. No single arba mil zuz. You give him 400 zuz. Sarim ba'ozno, let's say you pulled on his ear, or you did something to his ear, toash b'tzaro, you pulled on his hair, rakak v'higia bo roko, let's say you spit, and the spit reached him. If it didn't reach him, you wouldn't be responsible. Have your taliso mimeno, you took off his garment, para rosha isha, b'shuk, you uncovered the head of a woman in the marketplace. No saying in all these cases, you give arba meosos, you give 400 to Ze'akal, says the Gemara on top of Tzadi Yamabayz. This is the general rule. Hakol afi kvodo. Everything goes according to the honor. Meaning to say, everything goes according to the honor of the person who is embarrassed. And so therefore, we would think that a person who is more distinguished gets greater humiliation money. The Gemara is going to explain that further. But Rabbi Akiva argues with it. He says, Afilu yim aniyim shabisrael. Listen to the beautiful language of Rabbi Akiva. Even the poorest people amongst Israel, we look at them as though they're free people. So you're saying they just happen to be diminished right now from their assets. Who do you think you are? You come from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You come from greatness. And so therefore, even the poorest amongst us, we look at them as though they're great when it comes to humiliation. And furthermore, there was once an incident where a person tore off the head covering of a woman, b'shuk, in the marketplace. Bas lefnei Rabbi Akiva. She came before Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said to the guy who pulled off the head covering, you have to give her 400 zuz. Amar lo Rabbi, tein lizman, Rabbi. Give me some time to pay her. I need some time. I know that you're allowed to do that, but that's what happened. He didn't have the money. He wasn't liquid. He said, give me some time. Gave him some time. Shamra, Omedes al Pesach Hatzera. This guy saw that this woman was standing by the entrance to the courtyard. V'shavar sakad b'fanea. And the jug broke in front of her. Ubo ki iser shemen. And there was an amount of it, which was the amount of oil that you purchased for an iser. Gilta as Rosha. She quickly uncovered her head. And she was trying to save this oil by just a little bit of oil, picking up with her hands and putting it on her forehead. So there are two things here that are humiliating. One, she herself took off her head covering, and number two, she's going down on the floor for just a minuscule amount of oil to put on her head. So this guy quickly brought witnesses out to see what she was doing. Rabbi Akiva, and he says, "Look, Rabbi Akiva, Amar, he says to Rabbi Akiva, Amar Rabbi Uzu ani no saying Dawin Me'azus." He says, for this person, you want me to pay 400 zuz for humiliating her? She's humiliating herself. Rabbi Akiva says, you said nothing. Because we have a principle, one who wounds himself, even though he's not allowed to wound himself, or he's going to be exempt. But if others wound him, him. Meaning to say, just because she's exempt for wounding herself doesn't mean you're allowed to wound her. Than one who cuts down saplings. Even though it's not permitted, it's the prohibition of Baltashlis. Potter, he's exempt from damages, but other people, if they cut down his saplings, they're responsible. So the Gemara asks the question, when he says that you have to pay a mana, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, in the case of somebody who was tokeya in somebody's ear, what kind of mana is this? Is this mana tsuri tanan, which is the most expensive zuzim, or mana medina tanan, or just the regular run-of-the-mill mana? Tashma, that come and answer. Tahu garid takalechav. Also come to Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya. They came to Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya. They came to Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya. And Amalei, excuse me, who did they come to? They came to Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya, right? Amalei, ana, Rabbi Yossi Aglili. He says, it is I, it's Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Havwei manatsuri. Give her the manatsuri, which means to say, he says, give him the manatsuri tanan. Shmamina Manitzuri Tanan. We see from here that our Mishnah Rabbi Yossi Aglili is referring to Manitzuri, the most expensive one. Shmamina. So the Gemara says, but what's the language of Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya? Mai ha'ana ha Rabbi Yossi Aglili. What's the language of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi here? It says, it is I, both I, Rabbi Yossi Aglili. The Gemara explains, if you want to say, that this is what he was saying to him. I saw you. Rabbi Yossi Aglili the Amar Manatsuri. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says Manatsuri. Ziohavle, go give it to him. Ziohavle Manatsuri, go give him a Manatsuri. Remember the Eid Nasadayin. So you mean to say that I can be both the witness? I saw you do it, and now I'm also the judge because I'm saying the ruling is like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and it's a Manatsuri. So do you mean to say that a witness could be a judge, Vatanya, but we learned that they can't because Sanhedrin Sharoach. Let's say the court saw that one person, Sharagas and she killed a person. Some are witnesses and some act as the judges. That's different. Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Kiva says, they're all of them act as witnesses in Einasadayan, and the witness cannot be the judge. So we see from here, that's what Rabbi Akiva says, all of them are witnesses and the witness cannot be the judge. Rabbi Tarfon only says in his ruling in this case, because some of them could be the witnesses and some of them could be the judges. But he anyways will not allow the witness to act as the judge. He says, well, some of you could be witnesses, some of you could be the judges. So we see from here a witness cannot be the judge. So how could Rabbi Yehuda Nasi say, I saw it and I'm being the judge? How can the witness be the judge? So the Gemara answers, Kitanya, what this price is referring to is Kigon Charo Balayla. They saw it at night. So what this case is referring to is where the judges saw the incident. They saw the moon at night, or the judges saw the incident, not the moon. The judge saw the incident that happened at night, and so therefore they can't adjudicate the day on the basis of what they saw at night, because seeing is like receiving the testimony, and that's going to be considered like the beginning of the judgment. You can't make a judge case at night. And so therefore, since they were only able to judge the next day during the day, so therefore, what they saw last night was just like hearsay. And so therefore, some of them need to go back and testify the next day in front of the judges. But if they saw the action during the day, Rabbi Tarfon would say, yeah, they could indeed become the judges. Just that they saw last night, and therefore it's hearsay. Or alternatively, he has a different approach. It's I, and I hold like Rabbi Yossi Aglui de Amar Manatsuri. And he's not the witness, he's just the judge, and he says, I hold like Rabbi Yossi Aglui. And then there are other witnesses who are testifying against you. Go give them, so we see, go give them a Manatsuri. So we said, okay, one of the possibilities of Rabbi Tarfon is says the witness can be a judge. But now the Gemara asks a different question. Does Rabbi Akiva really say a witness cannot be a judge? But didn't we learn the following? If a man strikes his friend with a stone or a fist, Shimon Atimni Omer, what will be the halacha? Shimon Atimni says, Ma'agrof miuchad, just like the fist is distinct, Shamasur wa'edav wa'edim, that witnesses and the court can investigate it. Avkol Shamasur wa'edav wa'edim. So too, what can you be responsible for? Anything that can be given over to the court and to the witnesses to testify. Prat to exclude a case where it's lost. And Rabbi Akiva respond, Rabbi Akiva v'chi bezin iko. Did the guy strike the person in front of the court? Sheyodin kamiko v'amayiko, and so that they would know the extent of the blow. Im al shoko tzipor nafsho. Did they strike? Did he do it in front of the court, or to know, or did he strike him on the thigh or in some place where his soul would be a mortal blow? And furthermore, Rabbi Akiva says, let's see somebody pushes his friend, Meirosha Gag, Meirosha Bira, from the rooftop or the top of the building, mace, and he dies. Bezdin Hochanet, does Bezdin Hochanet al Bira, or Bira Hochanet al Bezdin? Does the court or the Bezdin have to go out to the top of the city, to the top of the roof to investigate it? And furthermore, if Nafla, Chod or Bona, if it falls down, you should have to go back and rebuild it. Yeah, but we don't require this type of direct evidence. What does it mean? Just like a fist, so just like a fist can be handed over to the witnesses to investigate, so to anything that can be handed over to witnesses to investigate. So we see from here, exception of the case of where they lost the evidence completely. But anyway, we see from here, we see from here that if the person would have struck the defendant in front of the court, then a nasa dayan. Then Rabbi Akiva was admitting that the witness could be a judge, and the person said no. L'dvarav de Rabbi Shimon Atimni. Rabbi Akiva here is only speaking according to the position of Rabbi Shimon Atimni, but he himself doesn't agree with that position. Okay, we'll go on. Hold on, let me just stop the recording.